thank you guys for coming. I first started using a Vasa trainer in, I think I figured it was 1991, and I'm not sure that it was the first swimming implement to emphasize this idea, but it was certainly the first one that I had come in contact with, where the idea was that your upper body was being used to create kind of an anchoring position, and the goal was to move your body over that stationary position. And that concept, I think, was really different from certainly what I had been exposed to, where the other side, the other way to present it is that in swimming, instead of creating a position or an anchor in the water and then having your body move over it, we were taught to reach, pull, and then kick from behind. And so this concept of creating an anchor, moving your body over it was fairly new to me. And I was working with Richard Quick at Stanford. I was an assistant coach, volunteer assistant coach at the time, and he loved it. So I think, when did you guys start selling them, Rob?
1990.
Yeah, so
That's where he got his first
and it was train Ergs, because I think we had a bunch. So if he liked something, then he would buy a lot of them. And we had a lot, and it was, and from that point on, I felt like the utility of this implement was not just to strengthen, and I think it's a great strengthening tool, and not just to create power. I think it's a great tool for helping create power, so speed of movement, and even, I mean, there's a whole lot of specificity of movement that we can get out of a Vasa, either the sliding rail or the erg. But it is also it's really, really effective for teaching concepts. And when you listen to strength trainers talk about the question of specificity, so is it useful in strength training to try to mimic what we want to do, either in a particular skill set in a sport, or in our cases, movement through water, a skill set in water? Is it useful to try to recreate that on land? Well, the research says that there's maybe at best 15 to 30% transfer of from land to, or from a specific exercise and strength training to the skill set in the sport. But I don't know that you can really measure that if you're trying to teach. I think one of the most valuable components of using something on land to teach a skill set in the water is that we can isolate positions, we can isolate concepts, and we can communicate in the moment with the athletes, which is really difficult, if not impossible, to do when they're swimming. So I want to go over just a couple of things first, kind of some basic ideas that I think are important when you're using the Vasa trainer. And I see Gary Hall, who's done quite a bit of work on the Vasa, and Bill Boomer, who's really influenced me a lot in the way I think about swimming. So if you guys want to jump in on anything that I'm doing and either add or subtract from what I say, then feel free to do so. Everybody else has permission too, but I'm giving those two special permission.
Matt, I'm just going to interrupt. I might add that what you're looking at is this Vasa swim ergometer, and actually because of Matt and his ideas of using, you can explain about these forward press, but we decided we could add a Vasa trainer pull-up bar to this monorail, because the slope angle of the monorail is so slight that it allows you to do some of the concepts that he's been talking about. So you can use it in both ways. The erg is more of a flywheel for resistance, but this allows you to use it like a Vasa trainer at a very low slope angle. So.
Yeah, you got a 2-in-1 here. We have a demonstrator, Maritza Paredes. Very nice to have you here today. Maritza swam at University of West Virginia for Sergio Lopez and is now living in the area. And Maritza is a good test case. She's not swimming anymore and experienced some injuries, some shoulder and lower back injuries. And I think if you feel anything hurt, you just let us know, okay? Because I think some of the things that have caused, especially if your herniated disc was a result of repetitive use or bad posture in swimming, then that's something that we may be able to see and address here. And I also think that if the shoulder injury was a result of bad mechanics, that's something we can see here too. So can you hop on here for me, and we'll start with some basics. And I'm going to start purposefully. Let's go with these. And I'd actually like you to grab onto them with your hands. So you can use the Vasa for a lot of different things. And Maritza, let's get really non-specific and just do some pull-ups here. So drop your elbows and pull up, okay? So this is somewhat non-specific, but still a good training exercise, okay? If we want to do pull-ups, we can get on a pull-up bar and do pull-ups, but this is a little bit lower resistance, and we can get some strengthening in. Now Maritza's having a hard time not swimming, so we're going to ask her to start moving towards regular swimming. And one of the reasons that we developed the forearm cuffs, we started using the forearm cuffs, is because I felt like that the idea of having the only pressure point that's helping you move up somewhere around the wrist or the hand, which it is on a paddle, was causing mechanical failure that was the result of a wrong concept. Okay, when we swim in the water, there's pressure, there's water pressure everywhere. Okay, on the whole arm, because the whole arm is moving, and because the speed at the hand is greatest, because this is the fulcrum here on the shoulder. The further you get away from the fulcrum, then the greater the speed is, so the greater the pressure is going to be. But there's sort of a graded pressure as you come up the arm, and there's even pressure that she should be feeling on the inside of the arm. And what I think the people who swim the best, if you were to watch them position themselves in the water, hold on to the water, and then move over that spot, you can imagine that the center of pressure is not on the hands, but it's actually somewhere a little bit higher than that. And I would say where I feel like I get the best kind of replication is when the cuffs are about a third to half of the way between the elbow and the fingertips. Okay, so now Maritza is engaging her lats. Yeah. Well, I'm going to come to that in a little bit. She's engaging her lats really well, and we can stop her in a number of different positions. So let's slide down and start out front. Okay. All right. So a lot of swimmers, when they put the paddles on, they'll move their fingertips together. Okay, and let's slide up just a little bit more. And when they're at this halfway point, they'll move their fingertips together, and that I believe causes them to spill water. So this is a place where we can do some really good strengthening exercises, and we do either just by holding this position isometrically or doing more of an isotonic exercise that's really slow, moving through to here. Okay, and you can point to the places where she's engaging her lats, and potentially she's a very good swimmer. Can you turn your fingertips in? Okay, so that's a pretty common mistake, is to turn the fingertips in, and that's essentially rotating the elbows down and using the scap stabilizers just a little bit more in a different part of the lat. And it's easier, but if this takes place in the water, then they end up spilling water. And you'll see, I think this happens because the goal, instead of trying to hold on to the water and move the body over it, the goal is for them to at some point, just get their hand through the water. Okay, and you can get your hand through the water really easily and still do what your coach says, keep a high elbow. If you slip, turn your fingertips in and push through. Okay, so for pure strengthening, you know, you can do full repetitions, but I think when you're putting together a season plan and the goal is to create maximal force, one of the best things that you can do, and this is technically I think really important, is to maybe even start about here and ask your athletes to move slowly to about this point and then come on back. Okay, these are the strongest kind of moments in a stroke. Okay, and different athletes and different coaches like to see different depths, and so we can ask Maritza if we want to come up a little bit higher, the elbows a little bit higher. I actually like the depth at which she was doing that, but this is a little bit more of what you consider a high elbow and maybe even a distance freestyler's stroke. It comes out a little bit wider. Let's go back underneath a little bit. This position I feel like can start to engage the core. Now, here's where I'm going to talk about posture. And this little flyer here, it says that I trained my team on the Vasa trainer, and you wouldn't believe what happened. Well, actually, I'm going to tell you that we didn't use this very much at all last year, and I'll tell you why. Because the idea that I had, you can relax a little bit, Maritza, about the way swimming works, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later this afternoon with Boomer, was that we have the kind of a primacy of energy systems and biomechanics. Okay, and the biomechanics were all about creating propulsion. What Boomer got me to see a little bit, and then a little bit the first year I worked with him, and then a lot probably last year, once he started moving really fast through the water by getting towed, was that the biomechanics are influenced a whole lot more by your posture than necessarily by the shape that your arms are creating. Okay, and so I came back and took a look at what we were doing on the Vasa trainer and saw the position that Maritza's in right now, which is a lot of stress on the neck, so she's pulling her head up. A lot of stress on the lower back. She's creating this arch in her back, and there's no incentive for there was no incentive for creating the right posture on the Vasa trainer. So there's a great way to isolate the lats, but the lats only. And if I felt like if we're going to take this into the water, and this was going to be specificity, then she was going to carry the whole thing into the water, which was a high head, an arch back, and then a real focus on the lats, and that last part is great. The first two parts are not that great. So we spent a whole lot of time last year with the biomechanics of our swimmers. It's not that we ignored the bench; it's we had a whole lot of work to do in the water to help try to create a better posture. So what suffered actually, and this is a plug for this machine, was I took a good hard look at the way we were swimming freestyle and butterfly, and even breaststroke, probably backstroke too. And the concept of anchoring had disappeared quite a bit. We were not creating very good. We were creating great posture in the water, but the idea of basically slowing down the arms and the hands so that the body could move over it had really kind of leaked out of the way we were swimming a lot of our strokes. This summer we renewed our focus on that and saw that in some ways by slowing down and not trying to rip through every arm stroke, we were now starting to combine that great posture, which put us in a much better position to create better impulses in the water. So Maritza, I'd like you to now, you got to do a little bit more coaching in order to be able to to use this machine with great posture. So the first thing I'm going to ask Maritza to do is to relax her head and elongate her spine. Okay? The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to put a little bit more pressure down on your sternum and tuck your belly button in and flatten your lower back. Okay, right there. That movement, can you do that again? Just arch a little bit if that doesn't hurt too much. Pardon?
It doesn't hurt.
Okay, so let's go back to the bad position. That's an arch, okay? And then she's rotated her pelvis down. Okay, just by doing that, we've changed the mechanics and increased the specificity of this next movement tremendously. And go ahead and let's go through a full range of motion here. Okay, and keep, you can watch, towards the end of that, there's a little bit of a lift. Okay, and you can drive your hips forward as you will in fly, but we also have to keep the pelvis rotated the way that you would at the end of the downbeat of a kick. Let's keep the head, there we go.
On the way back too.
Yeah, exactly, and on the way back, that's where a lot of the strengthening occurs.
Yeah.
But if you imagine what's actually happening on the recovery, so the eccentric movement, the way back down, okay, let's keep pressing the chest forward, ribs in, there we go. Okay, did everybody see what she just did? Okay, that's really, really important because this is not about force production when you get into the water. Okay, we can train force production on land, but it's really more about creating the right posture, ribs in, flat back. That's really good, really good. You want to relax, okay? And you can even do things like, all right, Maritza, how are you going to breathe and fly? Okay, good. So we can do things like ask her to put her head back in line and look at all the different ways you can rotate your head. So let's rotate it forward this way instead of lifting, okay? And when she rotates it forward and keeps her ribs in, okay, that's the way we want to breathe forward and fly. So instead of lifting the head back, she's kind of rotating on the hinge of her cheekbones. And when we do this, there we go. When we do this on land, keep that lower back flat, a little bit of pressure on your chest. That's awesome. Okay, when we do this on land, you can't do that in the water, right? We can watch video, we can show what you're doing and then tweak it a little bit and have her get back. But here, we can make some really important movements and ask her, like I can put my hand on her back and feel whether she's relaxed, stable, contracting, rotating her pelvis up, keeping her ribs in. That's awesome, thank you. So that's, I think, a way to really help us improve and increase the specificity of training, but also, I think whether any kind of strengthening is happening that's going to carry over into the water or not, the concepts and the ability to teach those concepts are, this is a great environment for being able to introduce, reinforce, tweak, and just teach those concepts. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover. Anybody have any questions about that? Yeah.
When you get a dialogue going with a swimmer on the trainer, and that dialogue can be used at the side of the pool. If your swimmer is swimming and breathing toward you, you can just go like this, or you can go like that, or you can point to the rib ends and remind them of what they should be doing when you see them falling off. So this is a really good moment to create that kind of a hand and mouth kind of dialogue with your swimmers, and you don't have to then wait until they get to the end of the pool. You can be coaching them up and down the side of the pool in the moment.
Yeah, and then the other thing that I started to say that somehow I got lost is that, we have these, let's say in butterfly, we've got these two different phases of the stroke. One is what we'll call the impulse, where we're creating force on the forearms, and and creating propulsion. The second is what we'll call the space, and the space is the kind of what you're doing in between the impulses. Okay, and that in fly is going to be the recovery. So let's go through a full pull here with great posture and keep press. There you go. Press forward, ribs in. Okay, and then so now on the recovery, this is the recovery, and we can simulate the recovery, especially when the angle's low. Let's imagine this as a recovery, and let's start talking about releasing the water by swinging back around here. Okay, and now we have an opportunity to talk about posture during the recovery phase. A lot of people, especially on the stroke when they're not breathing, will drop their head. So let's come up again. Good, very nice. And at that point, we're going to also keep the ribs in. Okay, best possible line from the tailbone out through the top of the skull, and then we can talk about how to land even. So you can stretch out forward here. Okay, and that's a great landing position. With the one issue with the cuffs, and one of the reasons we designed them this way is that if you do come straight out, dropped elbow, they're going to slide off. So we can't exactly do that, but Maritza, that was really good. Thanks. Last thing I'm going to do, does anybody here have an ergometer? All right, let me show you, or tell you, and you may already be doing this, but this is a test and a measurable way to build power that we used for a while on the biokinetic swim bench. But Rob is developing, or has developed, the ability to record data off of this. Do you want to say anything about that? The wireless?
Sure. It's you can already see the data on the power meter.
Right.
But what we've developed is a wireless transmission using ANT Plus technology. It's ANT Plus technology. So the data can go into a Garmin watch, or you can go direct to a PC, and you can store the data, analyze the data, look at different points on the data. So that's coming soon.
Little teaser there. But you can do some really cool stuff, and so both train power endurance, and measure both of those things by doing. We're going to do a 1 rep maximum pull. So you can do a couple warm up pulls here. Go ahead, and this is going to be best done in a fixed position on the bench, and you can do that by just moving it to a fixed point on the rail, or having a coach stand next to it. So she's warmed up now. You can but this has a measure of a total measure of watts. And let's just do one pull, a hard one, fast as you can go. Okay, and the measurement was 13. Okay, now let's go 10 of them. I'm going to reset this. All right, and the peak measurement was 113. What events did you swim?
200 freestyle, 100 freestyle, 100 bar.
Okay, so those are moderate distance events, and so her power output increased in as she went from 1 to 3 to about 6. And if we did the same thing for about 2 minutes, then we could track her total power output over that time and see how that is related to her 1 pull maximum, her 10 pull maximum, and then for the duration of her events, a minute or 2 minutes, we could see how that changed, whether it was it stayed as a percentage of of one of those two maximums, or whether it trailed off. And then we can train for that particular distance with those numbers. And we don't really have anything like that left in swimming. And this, being able to have those numbers and be able to measure them, repeat them on an instrument that's really highly accurate and calibrated well against itself, I think is really valuable for specifically training power output for the duration of the events that you want to train. So that's another use, yeah.
Do you use the bench to develop power, or do you use it to measure the power development?
Well, so okay, the question was, do we use bench to train or develop the power, or do we try to do that in the water? I think it's not. I think you can do both. You can, unless you're only going to train on the Vasa trainer, it's hard to separate where the changes are coming from.
Can you see improvements in like resistance in water training show up on this?
We haven't done this long enough to be able to know yet, but we'll look for it. All right. Well, that's about it. Anybody have any questions?
Matt, one thing that comes to my mind, based on what you were saying earlier about using it like a trainer and getting the posture right.
Yeah.
Something that we've noticed when people use the ergometer is when they're in a fatigued state, their posture can really go south.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is to see what happens with their power output and still trying to be mindful and maintaining that posture.
Yeah, and I would imagine you can see a correlation between their ability to hold that posture and their ability to create the power, because the posture isn't independent. Right. And the thing that I was talking to Rob earlier about is he sent me a couple years ago. What did he call it? It's like it's an
inflatable disc, like you've probably seen them. It's an instability disc.
Yeah.
That you inflate. You can sit on them. A lot of people use them at their desk chairs. But.
And so I dug it up a couple weeks ago, and we've tried putting it right, kind of centered in the sternum of people doing the Vasa, not the Erg, but the other one. And it's been fantastic because it's a great reminder of the fact that in the water we're actually balancing around this buoyancy point, and we're not fully supported the way a bench fully supports us. So we've been able to really reinforce some more of these postural ideas by using this instability balance disc on that particular bench. So there's another idea there.
Do you incorporate these in a circuit training system or mostly individual?
We do it in a circuit training system, and we always do it in groups of 2 or 3 because the teaching component is so important, and we'll pair up seniors with freshmen or juniors with freshmen, and require that they hold each other to a standard of posture and mechanics of the arms as well. So you can move with a team of 50. You know, we divide up into 3 groups of about 16, and you can move generally in groups of 3. We've got 6 trainers. We can move through fairly effectively.
What do you recommend for 36 to 12-year-olds in an hour and a half?
36 to 12-year-olds, an hour and a half.
Get on there and go.
How many do you have?
None.
No, how many Vasas do you have?
I'd love to have a bunch.
Oh, okay. I guess what I would recommend is with that group, you can start with 2, or 6. If we could get you a good deal on 6, and have them teach each other also. And so have a group session and take it slowly and say what you're looking for, because the teaching opportunity is so powerful that all of them really should be able to see it at once. You can have kind of a classroom session, and then start moving them through you can probably devote a whole practice to it, especially if you have an assistant coach. Do you have an assistant coach? Then have one person moving a group of 4 to 6 through at a time. Have them watch each other, critique each other, while the rest of the group is doing other activities, and you can use it as a station.
Until you teach, you only get about 55% of what you're listening to. When you teach, you get 90%. So teaching is mostly for the teacher,
Yep.
not just for the student.
Solidifies the learning.
What part of the season do you work with that? I mean, do you do it in the race pace phase or doing the whole season?
We do it in the whole season, and the slower movements are for essentially the first 2/3 of the season. And we'll do some higher speed reps at times, just to keep them fresh and to keep them moving. But in the last third of the season, that's when the speed of movement becomes a lot more important. And so we'll jack up the height on that thing and do 8, 6, 10, really explosive movements.
You turn it up like that, and it's not what you do in the water.
No, it isn't, and we don't start in this position that's a little bit compromised. We'll start a little bit lower, but it's still, the idea is still to be explosive and apply pressure here instead of leaning back into it.
And you drop that in the taper? Or you take
Yeah, we do. Yep, we'll drop it.
like 3 weeks out or something like that?
There are some people who will still get on it during some of our circuits just to remind themselves. They actually get on before practice to remind themselves again of the concepts. But yeah, we're done with our power production on land about 2.5 weeks probably before the last.
Matt, if you could, one thing I think is important for everybody to keep in mind is that any training tool you use, it doesn't matter whether it's a Vasa or if it's a weight stack or whatever. If the person uses it improperly, too much weight, poor posture, there's a chance for injury. So if you could speak to that a little bit about how you guys try to avoid injury.
Yeah, I mean you have to coach. You have to know what you're doing. You have to coach. And so just throwing somebody onto a machine like this will result in what we saw Maritza doing originally. I mean, it's amazing what people will do if they're not kind of drawing a line between the exercise and the end result. In other words, they need to understand why we're on here. So you can do pull-ups, and it's a great way to do pull-ups, but that's not why we're on here, and especially that's not why we're using straps or forearm cuffs. So the issues that cause injuries in the water are the same issues that you'll see on land. Again, I think that's why this is really important. If you watch, let me see. Maritza, let's alternate arms here, just swing. Okay, and now I'd like you to start to press out with this arm. Okay, if you watch the position that puts her shoulder in, let's freeze at the top on the next one, right here. Okay, the head of the humerus is popping out this way, putting pressure on the biceps tendon. That's repeating really bad mechanics, and if she's doing it on land, you'll see it in the water. So you have to know what you're looking for, but you can do some really good coaching, and you have to do coaching on this machine if the goal is specificity.
Matt, something else that a few coaches have brought to our attention. I'll get closer to your mic. A few coaches have brought this to our attention when they use the erg, but they'll notice that like in anything, with an action, there's also an equal and opposite reaction. So if someone is really digging in on the ergometer in freestyle, and especially if they're swinging out wide like that, you're going to see their feet start to pendulum side to side. And that becomes a diagnostic. You can start to see, and what does that mean? Does it mean that they're just not paying attention? Or does it mean that they have very poor core control and core strength? And you can see it right away, and then you can make a correction with them, and sometimes it even involves doing corrective exercises off the machine to strengthen that core. But several people have pointed that out, that and it really helps them to see that aspect.
Yeah, and I think you really have to be on the lookout for it, because the bench does stabilize you more than a lot more than the water would. So something you might be able to get away with without real obvious consequences on the bench, you can't get away with in the water. All right, thanks.